So you will be directed to enter the breakout room, and we'll have an opportunity again with representatives from all of the project team, city partners, as well as HAAB and guests. There will be a note taker, and we will come back and report out in just a moment. All right. Hello, hello. Thank you. Well, let's talk about the precedents and based on what you've seen, what uses or other things should the team spend more time investigating? Are there projects that you are aware of around the country, other precedents that we should look into that we aren't aware of? And maybe get some of your initial thoughts about some of the precedents that were shared today. I'd love to start with you, Dr. Ebony, if you're available.
Yes, I am, and my rat cage is spinning, but nothing is coming up that I can contribute right at the moment as far as something that we may be missing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a testament to how far few between these opportunities are, that you don't get to see them every day. You know what I mean? So as a reflection of, Black Black wealth and ownership and commercial spaces and those types of things. So I let me just think a little bit
Yeah,
and maybe something will pop up. Thank you.
indeed, indeed. Others, this is informal. I'd love to hear from you. Those again were just ideas to get us thinking about possibilities for this area. Are there ones that particularly grab you that you'd like the team to dive into? Or are you thinking or aware of other precedents, other possibilities that you would like for the team to explore?
Yeah, I think I have an idea. So, I heard like in Seattle, there are like places where you can listen to music and like around like certain types of genres, and you can like meet people that like those types of genres too. And so maybe those types of places could be present in the area.
That's awesome. I see a comment from Elijah around the community courts in Crenshaw. And as an athlete, student athlete, thinking about how that could be incorporated into this space as well. So that information is in the chat there. Great, great thought. Thanks for sharing. Other thoughts? This is the fun part, the exciting ideation, right? Hearing, we got to have electricity, we got to have, utilities, but what are the possibilities? We've heard of the priorities around wealth, around health, and cohesion, bringing us back together and places for us to gather. And so I know initially there was a PCC building. I don't know if that building is open yet, that I saw somewhere. Seemed to be an exciting development, something potentially like that's educational as well as space and that sort of thing. Was there an example of a Black bookstore or children's thinking about something? Other thoughts? That was a comment in the chat. I don't know.
Mhm.
Or others?
One of the things that just came to me, um, it's not here, but I want to say, let me not guess. Her name is Angel Gregorio, perhaps. It's called the Spice Suite, and I believe it's in Washington, D.C. And that could be just an example of a possibility here, where she bought some commercial space, and it's this in this particular case, it's all Black women business owners that joined, but a beautiful building, thriving area. And so she's been all over the news lately. And so that is one that maybe could just pick some pieces from it here and there and maybe look up. It's called the Spice Suite out of Washington, D.C.
That's awesome. Great. Yeah, I see Cadence put that in the chat. Other thoughts? Mr. Modica?
No, nothing really stands out to me. I mean, I obviously have some questions about a couple of the things that were featured as what already exists in our neighborhood space. Uh, the underutilization or the failed business history in some of those spaces, or even some of the living conditions, right? I mean, I don't like to throw dirt on things that are really innovative and great things, but if the living conditions mimic living conditions that you're trying to get people away from, and if the opportunity to utilize the space to have profitable, thriving business is the same old story, um, you know, how we think about placement, uh, governance, and support are going to be very, very important. And then, of course, community safety is the highlight of my thought process, because when you have a space, people are going to fill it. And if they fill it, it's got to be conducive to great use, to respect and ownership, right? Mental ownership, so that our spaces are not destroyed, defaced, or just not utilized, right? We don't want to build failures. I quite frankly would rather see land left vacant than land where something is just thrown on it to say that we've achieved something, and it really does not result in what the ultimate goal is, if that's understandable.
Absolutely. Appreciate it. Estelle, did you have any thoughts?
I have a couple thoughts. I don't know, maybe if thinking of if there's going to be living spaces, like there's going to be housing, maybe like a community kitchen,
Mm-hmm.
like where residents could come and cook or something like that and use the space or something like that. And then I don't know if this is appropriate or whatever, but I was kind of hoping that one of the businesses would be a dispensary on the on the cover.
I don't
That
see
it
why
would be
it's not appropriate. It's
a black,
legal.
yeah, a black owned dispensary, because the like it's very white here in Oregon, and I know that there's a black owned program here, like trying to get more black owned dispensaries in, and I thought that that would be a good idea to try to get, you know, a business on the covers.
I love that idea. Portland is such a great foodie city. It would be great to have like a food incubator, community kitchens. Um, I'm a foodie too, so I love the idea of kitchens. Joy Elise, did you have thoughts about possibilities?
Yeah, thanks. I really enjoyed hearing everyone else's ideas. What I'm thinking about was mentioned in the larger group about this third space, and something that I am really worried about. And I always want to hold space for wealth creation, especially in small businesses. But I'm thinking about the youth and having more opportunities where they can just be without having to pay money, and knowing, of course, that, libraries aren't what they used to be like it was when I was growing up, and other spaces in malls. Just thinking about what it would look like to have some more spaces where folks can be, that they don't feel like over surveilled or over policed or having to spend a lot of money, but can really just enjoy community connection.
I love that. Yeah, I think that leans into Mr. Modika's conversation about community safety as well, and figuring out the balance and making sure that um, it feels comfortable. I think we've been talking about that for a long time, about as we create this space, is our Black community members going to feel welcome and comfortable to participate and enjoy and take advantage of the spaces that are created. And so that ideal of safety and governance and creating a space that feels welcoming and safe for our young people. Other thoughts? We have some more time. I'd love to hear more about the Spice Suite. Cadence, are you familiar with that?
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. She started out as a Black-owned business selling spices and spice mixes, and then wanted to buy the location she was in, but the owner wouldn't sell to her, although they had made it available to some other white-owned businesses in the same building, and that got her fired up. And so she went to the city of DC and got $1 million from them to buy her own location. And so she did that, but then she established containers, like shipping containers, and established micro businesses essentially in this beautiful parking lot where like a nail salon and a hair place and another small business vendor went in. And so now she's created an ecosystem of small business and provides sort of the software too. So the mentorship and opportunities for those businesses to learn and grow together. She's phenomenal, and what she's doing is pretty amazing too.
That's awesome. We've got just a few more moments together.
I did have a thought.
Yes.
What is missing is a market space, fresh produce, fresh food, great supply chain, employment for our community, not necessarily corporate owned, right? So I live in Northeast, you've got corporate choices. That's it. It's really sad because they're understaffed, supply chain is terrible. And a lot of the foods that we want are not there. And so if we had a combination of farm to table space to also go with, why do we have a Saturday market on the school parking lot? Why can't we just have a place where there's Saturday market that's profitable and available to everybody every single day?
I love that. Great. Teresa, how are we doing on time?
You've got about 3 minutes, and I did bring up the PCC Opportunity Center if you want me to share it.
Oh, sure.
I think this is what you were talking about earlier.
I believe it is. It looks like a beautiful building. I don't know much about it. James, did you all have an opportunity to?
Yeah, what I can share about it is not any more in terms of like square footages and details, but what was really interesting about this project was the design process that they went through was really about like specific to this building, this site, and this architecture, centering trauma-informed design processes, creating places that you were just talking about, getting third places, making people feel welcome without paying an entry fee. There's a lot of things embedded in the design of this. I don't know if it's open. It's made substantial progress. It might be open by now. Definitely worth a visit. So the architectural expression, you might take it or leave it. It might not be your cup of tea, but I think the process, the design process that they went through was really strong.
Great. Thank you, Teresa, for bringing that up. I think, again, with all of the great news this week, we just had kind of a shot, an infusion of hope to be thinking about what this place can look like in 20, 30 years and how Abiel and Elijah and that generation can really dive into the space and create opportunities for themselves. So thank you both for being a part of the conversation. I think it's really important. And I know HAAB members have been looking to have more youth representation and to hear, because many of us will not be here to reap all of the benefits of this space. But this is the exciting piece. I would implore you to continue to be ideating and thinking about what potentially we could explore, other areas that come to mind. Please feel free to shoot me an email. This will not be the last opportunity for us to engage together around this. We have a long process, a lot of work ahead of us. Yes, sir. Come on. I'm gonna show back up. Indeed. All right, we are headed back to the main space to end our meeting together.
So you saw a lot. And one of the presenters is in the room, John, who presented prior to James. And that was quite a bit. We realized it's drinking from a fire hydrant. But want to talk at this moment as to what kind of things either inspired you or spoke to you based on what you saw as what could go on the cover, and or what other things would you like to see on the cover. Carrie, you are unmuted. Were you going to say anything?
I was not.
Okay. Wonderful.
I had a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Is this going to be earthquake proof? Like the cover?
That's a good question.
I'll speak to that. So the bridge has to be designed for seismic code, and then any building that would go on it would also be designed for seismic code. So yeah, we would be designing to the latest seismic.
Okay. And my other question is, what type of advanced technology will be implemented in the design? I mean, we're going to be entering into 2030. A lot can change. We see the change in even in digital currency. I even saw examples of freeways being able to recharge like cars. I've seen stuff about the ice, the freeway being able to heat up the street, so ice will not be able to be on the freeway. So I'm just curious of what type of advanced technology will be implemented during the project.
Yeah, I'll respond to that in that again, being very early in our process, there's not any of that specific technology being investigated as part of the project. That being said, we're at the start of the design phase, and so I think hearing about emerging technologies and things to consider are always great for us to put on a radar early and find whether or not that's applicable to be considered as we go forward.
Great questions. Any other comments about design possibilities and ideas for the cover itself?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, John.
No. I was thinking how when you say at either end of the deck is for a one-story building. How big of a one-story building? So really the way that our capacity evaluation to date, it's thinking of the building as if it's distributing its weight to those girders. And so it's more about the square foot load than it is the footprint. So that's the way we've looked at it to date. So what's the northern square footage? What's the square footage of a single story building? Which would determine how big it is, wouldn't it be? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So yeah.
Roger.
Yeah, we had talked about the advancement of economic development for the Black community. I'm just curious in terms of, I understand ODOT would own the land of the caps, who would own the buildings that would be built on the caps? Would that be ODOT ownership as well? And then if it is ODOT ownership, will it be some type of maybe I don't know, $1 leasing for Black businesses for these particular buildings that can help build economic wealth and things like that? So has that been considered, or is that possible?
I'll respond to that. Um, so the land, which is the I-5 right of way, will remain in ODOT ownership because we're actually a steward of FHWA for that. Now, on the deck and above, or above the deck, we are just starting the process, and we might have heard it touched on. They talk about governance, and we are just starting the process of what air rights would look like. Basically, think of like the Boston Big Dig and some of these other projects. They have done commonly 75-year and 99-year leases for these air rights. Okay, and that would be the mechanism that an organization would come in and lease that plot of the cover. Okay, now we're also looking at the land beside. It was shown in purple. The land beside the cover, as eventually, when this project is fully built out, it's going to be surplus land, and there are mechanisms, and we're looking at there are mechanisms for sale of that land, and the ICA process that happened a couple of years ago, we talked about that it would that they're saying that ODOT should sell that to Black-owned community development organizations. And so again, that process, that's the idea and that's the goal. And we're just beginning the process of figuring out how to make that happen within the rules and bounds that we have in the Oregon Constitution, and or what needs to change legislatively to make that happen. And then your other question about who would own the asset that you built on top, say a 1-story or a 3-story building, that would be the organization that built it.
So part of the 450 million won't be part of buildings on the caps. It's just creating caps.
No,
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. It will be building a portion of the cover, which the cap, and ready, getting as far as we possibly can, getting ready for buildings to go on top.
Okay, so it'll be opportunities for developers to come build upon the land. Okay.
Right, and the HAAB and the ICA process and our values on this project are that's done by Black-owned CDCs. Am I right, Mr. Washington?
You're correct.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
He's asking really good questions, though. I remember when I asked the same kinds of questions.
Yeah.
But actually, did you ever figure out the size of the buildings? For me, those small single buildings. How big of a building is that? I mean, compared to what I was seeing in your sketches, man, you had pretty like metropolis in the center, but how big was those buildings on the side? I mean, those front and back buildings.
Well, okay, John Wolf, isn't 2A like 20,000 square foot lot?
Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
I was gonna
Yeah.
give you that context, John, is that north site 2A is just short of 30,000 square feet. But it's, again, it's a, yep.
Yeah, edge to
Okay.
edge. Now you got to have a little bit of utility access, driveways, building services, stuff like that. But 30,000 square foot, single
Big
building.
building. Yeah, it's a
Yeah, it
nice
is.
sized building. Yeah, great, great. And then the land around it would be a lot of the flat ground between the next building. How much distance is that between the building and the next one? That small building in the metropolis area in the center of the cover. What's the distance between those two buildings?
I guess I don't know which site you're thinking of.
Well,
in
I'm thinking
particular.
about, say, the first one, if I'm going northbound, right? And I hit the first small single story building, right? The distance between that building and the big complex center building, on the center of the cover, what's the distance between those two buildings?
If I'm tracking you right, they'd be separated by the Weidler Street. They'd be separated by the street, which is 60 or 70 feet apart.
Okay, so maybe about the size of a backyard between the two buildings.
Pretty big backyard.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think so.
Be like a park area or something.
It could be park area, it could be parking, could be part of the building landscape that's
Yeah,
required
got you.
by the city.
Well, yeah, I was just curious about how far in location between the buildings. I know you had to jump over one of the girders or one of those, right? And then put you in the center. So, and we're talking about the distance of about what, a mile 0.7? The span of the
about
cover?
a 1,500 foot long cover. And Mr. Washington, I would point you to, there's a map that was in the HAAB binder that has some of these areas and dimensions. So it's page, it's labeled as design page 14, or it's 24 out of 39. So
look at you, my technical
that,
buddy. Now, I was always wondering what this book was really all about, though. So, so now it comes in handy, but voila, I have it available. Okay, so what
By
page
the
you
way,
say? Yeah.
that information is on the website also. So if you don't have a booklet, you can go to the website, you can download all of this information. So that's for Karanja, Raven, Dr. Richard, if you don't have that handbook that's in John's hand. All of that.
Thank you very much. I yield my question to the Honorable Dr. Holt.
Well, I appreciate it. What I would ask of you, everyone in this space, it is a lot of information to process. It is. And that's okay. This is not a one-off. This isn't, your only moment to engage. I want to encourage you to keep thinking about and processing, because we are really, as was said by James, we're early on in the opportunity to do something pretty amazing and to think about how to shape and establish a community. It's really what we're talking about. Is what does it mean to build community, and what are the elements within community that are high values, which is why we asked about priorities in the first breakout group. So as you're thinking, you still think through priorities and think about what are the things that are important, and then what does that mean? So Raven, for example, as you're talking about third space, as you're talking about this opportunity for people to do that, right? And so what does that look like in a tangible kind of dynamic, and where potentially could something like that fit into the larger landscape? So it's pretty creative. It's pretty phenomenal to be in the seat of thinking about what we have been kind of, all of us kind of birthed into, and that's how the community was designed when we got here. We now have a chance to design community for generations that are coming. So.
Man, Dr. Holt, hi, John Washington again. Whenever I hear you speak about community and these types of things, and thinking about anew, I think about Hobbes, when Hobbes thinks about, a new society awaits a new man, and a new man awaits a new society. I mean, and when I hear us discuss a community, most of the time it's down to a technical aspect of a community, about building and about the housing and the economic development potential. But it's really, it behooves me when I stop and I think about the mental or the wellness aspect of our community. You know,
Yeah.
how did the Portland-based community even arrive to its idiosyncrasies and its nature the way that it is? And are we going to continue to try to reduplicate that? Or are we going to
Right.
bring about a new community or a new man? You know, and so I'm just really perplexed as to how do we fund even when we look at the social wellness of our community, when we don't even look at social health welfare right now in our conversations. I mean, so I guess I'm just introducing a different perspective right now.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, holistic approach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So
what services or organizations or companies or businesses that Blacks can, that our community could bring in, that's a business that really is a solid base business that would look at how we would begin to address some of these concerns.
Well, emotional wellness is a big deal.
Yeah.
Mental health is a big deal. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Good points. Appreciate it. We're going to get snatched out in moments. We will be transported back into the larger group. Look at that. So I will see you
Leave
on
now.
the other side.
Hello, all. Welcome back. So our discussion will be based on what you just saw. What uses or precedents should we spend more time investigating? And if there's any projects that should be considered as examples. And I know that was quick. Isabel, do you have slides again that we can share so folks can kind of see our visual learners like me?
Yes, I can pull those up. Okay. Let's see. Can folks see that?
Yes.
Great.
Can we move to the next slide? And go ahead to the next one. And the next. And did we have one more? So for our HAAB members and guests, any feedback you have about those uses or precedents and things you might direct the project team to spend more time investigating, and any projects on your radar that you would encourage considering as examples.
Yeah, so I think it less of an example because we're still in the design phase, but thinking about the Williams and Russell project just up the street and how that's estimated to be about $115 million in total for those three sections of the project. Thinking about that size and scale of a project and those types of uses in a project, and then how that fits with the likely funding that we'll have. Because I think about how that project's gone and how a lot of it would not be possible, especially to be done in the way that the community and our organization imagines it could be done if we didn't have all of the funding from the city and the funding from the state. And in that making up a substantial, if not pretty much most of the funding that we're going to be getting for the project. And so thinking about, like the Louisa Flowers building is great, is cool. But if we wanted to build a building of that size and scale, um, what kind of funding resources and how would the government agencies work together to make sure that the project actually had enough funding that it could achieve the goals that it was trying to achieve?
Go ahead, Micah.
Yeah, I think building on that, I think Williams and Russell would be a great thing to include. I think Albina 1 would also be a great project to include, and that it's important to have some post-pandemic options because the development landscape is so cyclical and it's hard to match projects that happened at different stages in a real estate development cycle because the funding is going to change just with interest rates and capital availability and the like. And I'd also say it sounded like this is for future discussion, but just in terms of the land ownership and land rights for the cover, whether that stays under kind of ODOT or transfers to a private use is probably going to dictate what type of development can take place depending on those terms. And so I think determining that before we can look at examples might be a step, but I like all of the examples brought forward. They're great examples, but I think just given that we're working in a post-pandemic landscape, that looking at some of the current projects going on could be great, and including Albina 1 and Williams and Russell.
I also think too, if you're looking at, because it's an entertainment district, developments around stadiums, around coliseums, around arenas, and especially those that have been supportive of one community or another, that'd be very good. Yeah, because again, I think one of the big benefits we have here is we've got a big economic driver in the Moda Center that could drive traffic to certain things, and using those as ideas to springboard off of would be helpful.
Thank you. Go ahead, JT.
Yeah, and just agree with everything everybody said here, and also just would like to keep in mind, when we're talking about the cap itself, we are vertically constrained, right? So trying to get creative about the way that we imagine a development that maxes out at 3 stories high over a roughly 7-acre geographic footprint is interesting. I'd be really interested in exploring conversations around the creation of significant landmarks for the city that are rooted in Black history, Black culture, but things that draw people to the district. One of the ways that we like to talk about the potential of the highway cover in the long term is really not just a gateway to an entertainment district, but a gateway to a residential Lower Albina, right? So thinking about the cover as a gateway, thinking about experiences and buildings and architectural aesthetics that lend themselves to this feeling of welcoming people into a space and I don't know, stewarding them or shuttling them in a particular direction could be a use as well.
Thank you. Go ahead, Stephen.
I was just going to bring up, looking at the work that they're doing at the Lloyd Center and the envisioning. I think where that is, where it makes sense there is that one's stuck in the middle of a neighborhood area as well. And so you have to not only think it as, a destination, but more so a thoroughfare, and how and when and who's going to be moving past that area. Williams and Russell, less than 2 acres. This is 7 acres. And just also what's going on with the real estate environment. I mean, I remember doing deals in the 2000s and how we never thought someone would pay $700 for a 2-bedroom apartment on Williams and Russell back in 2008. And lo and behold, now people are paying $2,000 for a 1-bedroom on the same street. And so these things change. And like, how do you be planful, but also opportunistic, and also be really, really intentional around how you're impacting the people that are already there and the uses that are already happening around where those caps are going to be with the existing businesses, residents, and the natural movement of people in that area, and how it can be additive versus feeling like this thing that's very much out of place. As JT mentioned, it's not going to be a super dense place. And so, what are the things that you can get people really excited about, and what are some nice to haves versus want to haves versus, ultimately you build the stuff you can afford, right? And so, all those things need to align. And so, I just always want to be cautious around like managing expectations whenever it comes to like the things that are going to be built in the next 5 or 10 years or whatever the time frame is going to be. I think that's where people lose trust and lose faith in the public sector because expectations just weren't managed appropriately.
Thank you. And I think to Micah's point earlier, my understanding is there's a couple of different options around both on and off cover and what ownership looks like. And so I don't know if HAAB has had that. I think you all have had that conversation, but if there was anything to add there for our guest, we could uplift that too. So we've heard a couple of different types of projects. I think any other ideas around uses that you want to make sure we capture to bring back to that large group?
I would just echo what Steven said about managing expectations. A lot of times I've seen like meetings happen where they ask me like, what do you want to see? But we already know like half of these things can't happen. So I would frame the conversation around like, here is what is possible, or here's where we can take input rather than just like asking people, because again, it does lead to, and as always keeping in mind what Mr. Posey had said earlier, just about the harm that has been done with the Black community since the beginning of Portland, and keeping that in mind with how we work on this. And then the other thing I would just say, it's kind of mentioned throughout, but just art. I think that that's really important. I haven't seen a ton of like, for example, Black statues, especially ones that like highlight history. We got the MLK statue. There's a few more. I'm honestly blanking on some of them, but those could be good spaces. Murals, things of that nature. How do we incorporate youth voice and design and ideas into this as well? We have like the Camp Elso design forum. How are we incorporating youth art, youth business into this? How is there space for them in there as well? I think are all important considerations.
Thank you. I saw a lot of head nods, a heart on that one. Absolutely.
And just to that point, to Lakiana's point, I think it would be really amazing to prioritize and center Afrocentric design aesthetics in some of the references that we pull in, that the ODOT team is pulling in, just so we can start thinking a little bit more culturally specifically about who we are trying to build for, what the overall purpose of this entire development is, and who we intend to feel, like who we're trying to welcome back into this part of the city.
Thank you. We have a little over 2 minutes left, just to let folks know, but please do keep jumping in with your thoughts and ideas. Andrew, anything you want to uplift in this conversation? And the answer can always be no, but I always like to ask.
I do appreciate you asking, but I do feel that everyone else really did highlight and a lot of things that I was going to say. So it's good to have the other folks, other guests, really amplify what kind of like the other HAAB members mentioned. So, but thank you though.
Shannon, I'll continue to talk about this with other groups. One of the priority points that you guys listed out early on around the different priorities was around affordable commercial. What we know in Portland from data that the city gathered in 2014, Black and Latin business owners pay more than market rate generally per square foot on their retail spaces. So this idea that we need to supplement the cost of commercial space just really isn't a thing. What we need to be helping founders do is make informed decisions on the spaces that they do rent. I just don't want people to think that our businesses can't locate in spots where the rents are market rate. We are already paying market rate and then some, according to the data that we were able to gather. So we can afford it. It's just got to be a good spot for our business.
And on that note, you know, it might be interesting to see ODOT partner with other bureaus at different levels of government to, you know, get involved in this conversation of, you know, would it be possible to create something akin to a preference policy equivalent for business? So we're not just talking about intentionally moving people back into housing, but intentionally moving diverse business owners back into the district as well.
Absolutely. I love that. And I resisted going down the housing rabbit hole that I can quickly go down as a wonk, but I think having a really more robust conversation about that in the community makes a lot of sense as well. Thank you all. We're about to go back into the large room, so we'll see everybody back there.